I want to tell you a story of a fish that really has only gained its both scientific understanding and aquarium hobby popularity within the last 30 years. However, the fish was originally scientifically described by modern science all the way back in 1840. We're going to talk about the jewel of Papua New Guinea and Australia, the rainbowfish. Hello everyone, this is Bentley, and today we're going to do a second video kind of similar to the angelfish video I did, which we'll have that up in the corner if you're interested. I talked a little bit about why angelfish are special to my family, some of the history of the angelfish. I want to take that same road now for rainbowfish. The history on them is really, really interesting, especially considering that they were discovered scientifically a long time ago, but it's really only in the last 30 years or so that we've seen some really significant scientific work to come to understand these fish, and some of the most important work is still ongoing. Rainbowfish are, well, they encapsulate my world. I love them to death. I think they're absolutely magical. The way that they can just shift colors like this, right? And it's all of them. Every species is just a rainbow of color. And absolutely wonderful. It was very recently into my return to the hobby, almost a little over 5 years ago now, that rainbowfish captured my heart, and now they're in basically every fish tank I own, with very, very rare exception. Just like the guy swimming behind me, I cannot get enough of this fish, and their history is even more fascinating. So let's take a quick dive down the history trail, and then we'll talk a little bit about why rainbowfish are so special to me and why, well, I can't shut up about them. In 1840, the scientist John Gilbert discovered the first rainbowfish to be scientifically discovered by modern science. Of course, native populations were aware this fish existed, but in Australia, he found the negrons, or the black-banded rainbowfish. However, back then in the 1840s, it was assumed that this was another species of a type of fish in Australia called a hardyhead. The big definition here doesn't matter all that much. However, they didn't scientifically officially describe it until a lone specimen was found at the Natural History Museum of London by John Richardson, who officially described in 1843 the Atherina negrons, the official genus for one of the hardyhead species. Now, this gets really interesting because it takes a long time on this particular fish to realize that the rainbowfish is not a hardyhead. It's not until 1862 that an American scientist, Thomas Gill, did enough research on the lone specimen to realize that this isn't a hardyhead at all. There's too much difference, not enough similarity. And keep in mind, this one specimen's been sitting in formaldehyde the whole time, so it's not even a live fish to study. But this is something different. And that's where the genus that we know today is Melanitania came from. It isn't until much later that the family names begin to exist. Now, Melanitania roughly translates out of Latin for black band. So most of your Melanitania rainbowfish, which is a bulk of the large rainbowfish, are technically black band fish. Neat little fact, and you'll notice that in most of those Melanitania fish, there is some band of black typically in them, especially in things like the Trifasciata species. Now, it takes us until 1894, so another 32 years, to get the fledgling start of the official family name Melanitania nay for the entirety of rainbowfish. There's a few other ones long term, but this is going to encapsulate all our big rainbowfish, the ones that have the most scientific study early on. So think about that. It takes another 30 years for that. And then to get the official family name Melanitania day, that doesn't happen for another 70 years. That's going to take us all the way to 1964 with Ian Murrow. And officially, at this point, in the 60s, Melanitania day is the family for rainbowfish. It's the first. There are several others, but It's interesting it takes us that long, right? 1840, first discovery, 1843, we misname it as a hardyhead, all the way to 1964 to officially get the family names. Remember, it's family, then genus, then species when it comes to scientific names, right? So a Melanitania nigrans is the genus, and nigrans is the species. And then it comes from the family Melanitaniidae. And the kind of fledgling family to begin with before it's officially scientifically described is the Nae instead of Day, for those that are curious about the rather chunky history behind this stuff. Now that gives it full family status, but it isn't until one of probably the biggest heroes in all of modern day rainbowfish keeping, Gerald Allen, that we get the official classification generically for rainbowfish. And that didn't happen until 1980, 40 years ago. It has only been 41-ish years since the generic classification for rainbowfish was put into science by who is arguably the father of modern rainbowfish keeping, Gerald Allen. And for some little background, if you've ever been curious, he has a fantastic book. I'll link it down below. It's a picture coming up right now, but Gerald Allen's book is the one that took Gary Lang from only ever having kept one random rainbowfish species to becoming my personal fish hero. A guy who has made multiple trips to discover rainbowfish, something like 15 or 16 different species that have been discovered by him. Gerald Allen is the guy who is basically the name when it comes to modern rainbowfish keeping and understanding and science. That is the man, the myth, the legend, and he inspired many more. So you're probably going to hear just a little bit more about Gerald Allen coming up. Now, the most active period, if we're going to dive back a little bit, of ichthyological scientific exploration, aka looking at fish, happened by Dutch naturalists between 1903 and 1920. So a lot of our understanding of where some of these fish started to come from, but not the scientific description for Australia and New Guinea, the whole Angfa region, if you will, the Australia-New Guinea fishes, right, happens in this period. The majority of the early collections of a lot of these fish in this area, which included many rainbowfish, were summarized by Weber in 1913. So you think about that, it's really only been about 100 years that we've scientifically started to dive into these fish. Unlike angelfish, which had been described and captively bred at that point, we're only starting to understand and collect these fish at this point. So very interesting how different the science is, and part of it is just because of the locations. Since 1970, right? So we don't even have the generic classification yet. That's not until 1980. Since 1970, about 130 Australian and New Guinea rainbowfish species have been scientifically described, or are awaiting description. They aren't even fully described, not all of them. So even think about that. In this period of time, 130 different species of fish have been basically fully scientifically described or are in the process of being done so. It is estimated that if the number of species of rainbowfish alone, not all of fish in Australia and New Guinea when it comes to freshwater, and saltwater there's tons and tons of stuff, but freshwater, it's estimated there are hundreds, if not thousands of species of rainbowfish. And part of the reason behind this is because the way that especially New Guinea and some of the islands around that area they're very mountainous regions, they're very isolated, and it creates lots of isolated water systems. In these water systems, these fish have been allowed to thrive basically untouched for a very long time, so their evolutionary process is distinct in each very small water area. So you could have a small drainage or a little creek or a lake in a different region that doesn't touch anything else and no other rainbowfish can get to it, that has had one rainbow slowly evolving over time to make many, many, many different species. Now, overall, they might share some similarities, like, oh, these are all trifasciata, or these are all goldii, or these all share similar things to this rainbow fish, right? And you've got genus, of course, that groups a lot of them together, but you'll see a lot of, like, rainbowfish tend to have, like, Melanitania, Goldie Eye, and then they have a catch location. And part of that is because we haven't scientifically described them all, and the way that we differentiate each one is by where it was caught. This is really, really big, especially in rainbowfish, just because there are so many of them that are being found, and it takes a long time to scientifically describe them. People like Gary Lang, George Hans Evers, Gerald Allen, recently Peter Unmack, who's absolutely fantastic. These are people who are doing a lot of this scientific description, and honestly, it's kind of incredible to think that every year there's more and more. Every time that one of these people in these groups takes a Johannes Graf, another person that's great, takes a trip, they're discovering new species because each of these areas are so remote and so isolated that the rainbowfish evolve so differently. Another like cool fact that just might make it obvious as to why this is so crazy is that New Guinea today is less known about than any other area of landmass of similar size on the planet. It is so diverse and so remote in many cases, and treacherous in others, that it's just not well discovered, except for the native peoples who live there, and most of them tend to isolate away from outsiders like the scientists that do a lot of this work. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I go into my personal thing is the IRG and ANGFA. So ANGFA is the Australian New Guinea Fishes Association, and then the IRG, I have to look at this to read it because it's German. Internationale Gesellschaft für Regenbogenfisch. I know it's terrible. I'm sure somebody from Germany will definitely fix this up for me, but these are the two major associations that are out there, and they have sponsored many of the expeditions, along with some taxonomy work. A lot of Gerald Allen is his official name, but most of us just know him as Gerald Allen. A lot of his work have been sponsored by these two associations. And the kind of like most recent one is the Rainbow Conservation Fund. They have been doing a lot of work in Australia through the University of Canberra to save a lot of these rainbowfish from potential extinction, hybridization, etc. And they've been, in the process, documenting a lot of the Australian rainbowfish. That's the history. That's the chunky part, right? And I had to go back to my notes because it's hard to remember it all. But rainbows for me, when I got back into this hobby, I remember I was watching videos and I was getting ready to figure out what I was doing for my first tank, and I had this Fluval Flex 15. You guys see it all the time behind me when I do live streams. And I had this 125 downstairs, this big glass tank, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And I was watching Aquarium Co-op, of all places, and I saw a tour of this guy named Gary Lang. And the thumbnail was this big, beautiful Bozeman eye rainbowfish. And all I could think was, like, what the heck is that? And so I watched the tour, and I was just enthralled. All this color, this big, boisterous personalities. Oh, and they're community schoolers that like planted tanks, and I wanted to do live plants. I was hooked. And for a lot of people, they think that, like, rainbowfish are kind of goofy, and a lot of people tend to complain about rainbowfish is that body shape. And I can even remember at the time when I was looking at it, my roommate at the time who, he was helping me with a bunch of stuff. He's like, I don't know, man, those things look really goofy. And it wasn't until we saw a group of adult rainbowfish in person at the co-op that had been dropped off by somebody who had to move and couldn't take their fish with them that he was like, okay, I get it. He saw him in person, was just like, yeah, I get it. And those are the first rainbowfish that I bought. And, man, I was hooked. It's just, there's something about rainbowfish and how personable they are. They're not shy at all. They'll sit there and just beg for food. They have, like, phenomenally endless stomachs, it seems to be, that they'll just beg and beg and beg for food. And they'll watch as you go across the tank, and they'll chase you down the tank. It's just, there's something about that interaction. And a community schooler for me, because I grew up with community fish and schooling fish, your tetras, your danios, all that kind of stuff. That's what I grew up with as a child. So I love those kind of fish. That's just, it brings back that nostalgia to me, but I get to do it with a bigger, beautiful fish, right? I was absolutely enthralled by discus as a child, and now having never seen rainbow fish before I came back to this hobby, I don't want anything else. I keep other fish, of course, but the bulk of the fish I keep for a reason is because I'm so enthralled with their personality, their color, their uniqueness, the fact that you can get a rainbow fish in seemingly any color you've ever wanted, and it's all natural. There's no line selection breeding to make it happen. There's no crazy stuff. This is just beautiful, beautiful nature. My friend Jason of Redfish Bluefish always likes to say the living jewels, and rainbow fish are the epitome of that statement. They truly are living jewels, and I like to describe them as magical because if you've ever watched a male rainbow fish color all the way up and shift his colors and do the little dance when he's courting females or spar with other males, it's wild. It's so wild to watch how they shift and shimmer and the big forehead light, and they're such goofballs at the same time. You can't help but just be enamored by them when they're putting on a show. The way that like sun reflects off their scales, they have these beautiful iridescences. On top of all this color, they'll show you even more. That's why they're called rainbow fish. They are a rainbow of color, and it can come on like that. They can be like, just woke up and then all of a sudden it's showtime. And it's such an incredible thing to watch, such an incredible thing to enjoy. You can tell, like, I've been keeping rainbows for 4 years now, almost 5, and I get excited every time I have the prospect of babies. I get excited when I see rainbow fish go from just a little silver minnow to I start seeing that first little bit of color. And then it's like the whole process of rainbow fish I keep saying magical, but it really is, because they start as these little teeny tiny pencil streaks, right? And then they grow, and you can finally identify as like, oh, that is a baby fish. And then a little bit longer, and they start to get that very early rainbow fish body shape, and you're like, oh, it's a rainbow. Okay, now we're getting there. And they grow a few more months, and you get to like 6 months, and you start seeing color come in. And man, what a time that is, because it's a few days ago there was no color. They were just silverfish, and now all of a sudden that color's creeping in. And you're starting to see them. You're starting to see that activity. They're like 1.5 inches at this point. They're probably already trying to spawn because they spawn way earlier than we think they do. That color's coming in, and you just get to watch this beautiful fish slowly but surely take you through this process. Other fish, it happens so fast that you almost don't get to appreciate all these little moments in the life of these type of fish. With rainbow fish, because they're such slow growers, you do. And man, that I'm telling you, the first batch of bozeman I fry that I ever raised up was almost on accident. And I had like 30 fish that survived outside of the first month, and watching them grow, watching them color up, being able to see what I could finally go, oh, there's the first few boys, and there's the first few girls, and like being able to sex them, man, it was just, it was such a wonderful time. It put such a joyful, childlike glee in my heart, and that's never left me. And I think that's part of why I love rainbows so much, is I can sit across from a tank like this and watch them for hours, because the colors change, the behavior changes, the way that they'll focus on me versus totally ignore me and try and court or spar or hold territory, whatever it may be. It's just, it shifts so constantly, and they're such fascinating little creatures that I cannot help but love them. And the more that like members of my family have seen them, people that have come over to buy plants, I can't tell you the number of times I'll look at my big rainbow fish display and be like, what kind of fish is that? Right? Because you go to a store, you don't really ever see them. They're silver minnows when you see them in a store. You don't see big adults. And you get to explain it to them and tell them their history. And it's just like, those are so, how come I've never seen them? And you're like, oh, have you ever seen like a fish that was a silver minnow that was like $15 at your store? And like, yeah, that's probably a rainbow fish. You know, it's like kind of like that. It's like they're such slow growers, but man, they're amazing to me. And I hope this little like dive into the science behind it, because really like the understanding of them and like it seems like every year this new crazy, colorful, beautiful rainbow fish comes out. Like most recently, there's the tawa is probably the new hotness, if you will, and that's this fish up here. A good friend of mine. If you want to see some in person, check out Hoon Aquatics. He's another local Seattle guy, but he's a buddy of mine. He's got some. He's been raising them up. They're beautiful fish. You know, that's kind of like the new hotness. But yeah, there's always something to like capture that wonder in your heart with rainbow fish, and I think that's part of why I'm always like preaching them so strongly. So with that being said, there's a little history into rainbow fish and a little look into what puts that childlike glee into my heart when it comes to keeping our little friends in glass boxes. If you've enjoyed this video, you know, help that magic YouTube algorithm. Give it a little thumbs up. Maybe put a little comment. Tell me what you thought was most interesting about this video. Maybe it bored you. Whatever it may be. Let me know down below. You know, I love hearing that feedback from you guys. If you did not enjoy this video, you can hit the thumbs down twice, and I'll just keep talking about rainbows, because that's what I do. And if you've been here, thumbs down, and all the videos about rainbows all the time, I got nothing for you, man. I'm a rainbow fish specialist. That's what I do. If this is your first time seeing this video or anything on my channel, consider subscribing, ring the little notification bell. It really helps the channel. You know, the usual YouTube algorithm dumb stuff. I got to do the YouTube thing. But seriously, I have a live stream every Tuesday, videos every Saturday. We talk about all sorts of stuff, from educational things, pseudo history like this now is kind of a new thing, product reviews. Yeah, there's tons of stuff. Lots of stuff about plants. I'm a big planted fish tank guy. But yeah, if you're interested, hit a little subscribe. Help out your local favorite crazy person who loves rainbow fish. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome. How terrible would it be if I tried to like make taste the rainbow my catchphrase? You ever thought about that? Just be horrible. Plus, I'd probably get sued.